Okay, hello everybody. How you guys doing? My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. What's happening? And thank you all so much. Let's go ahead and get started. Today is the June 19th, 2021, and we're going to be talking about Christian Dominionism this week. Which is a very interesting and somewhat disturbing subject. Let me just go ahead and open up my notes here. Give me 1 second. 2, 4, 5. Very nice, very nice. Okay, so let's see here. We're just going to scroll up, blah, blah, blah. Still kind of getting the hang of having like a page of notes and like 2 monitors and a bunch of other things like all together. But that's okay. So before we get started on this is our current piece that we're working on. And I think it's looking pretty good, you know? Kind of have like a monster reunion sort of thing going. You know, like they're like this was like a high school you know, band or something, or the football team at their monster high school, you know, and they're all just sort of like, I don't know, maybe this is their like 10-year reunion or something. I think I need to like clean up this text here on this banner. That's not looking very good. So maybe we'll start with that. Okay, so Christian Dominionism, what is it exactly, right? Let's go ahead and zoom in on this guy. In fact, you know what, let's just do that right now, because, yeah, this text up here looks like shit, especially that. That looks horrible, so let's fix that. Let's see here. Okay, Christian Dominionism. What are we talking about here? Well, so it's the idea that, and it comes from a few interpretations of the, you know, Bible, right? A couple of different interpretations of various passages in the Bible that basically say that mankind should have dominion over the earth, right? Specifically, it's from Genesis 1:28. And it goes like this. Here's the actual quote from the King James version of this quote, right? Says, "And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the seas, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." Right? So for this reason, Christian dominionists believe that they have a divine mandate to not only rule the earth, but rule all over the rest of mankind as well. So that's Christian dominionism, essentially. The idea that, you know, they have been given dominion over the earth, and that includes dominion over all of the peoples of the earth, right? And in the United States, this has been expressed mainly by trying to institute hardcore conservative Christians into every aspect of life, right? In particular, in high-ranking positions within the United States government, right? But not just the government, also other areas as well, you know, corporations and stuff like that, you know. So there's what they call hard dominionism and soft dominionism, right? And there's also lots of different movements, right? But they all kind of share certain characteristics, you know. And it's these 3 characteristics that, you know, all dominionists kind of, you know, kind of share to one extent or another, right? Because there really is no, like, denomination specific or specific church that is where these people come from. There's no like sect or church of specifically Christian Dominionists. It sort of cuts across all different cuts across like many different churches and many different I guess what do you call that, denominations of Christians, right? There's even some like even like Catholics. There's even like Catholic Dominionists, right? Although they're not as powerful in the United States, at least. But there's a certain things that they all share, right? So they all support Christian nationalism, right? You'll hear this a lot from conservative Christians when they say things like, this country is a Christian country, right? That sort of thing. It was made for Christians, by Christians, and that kind of, etc., etc. That's it's an undeniable part of our heritage, blah, 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 blah. That's usually a form of soft dominionism there, and they'll use that as an excuse to try to break down the wall between church and state a lot. Let's see. Then they promote religious supremacy. They don't really respect other religions or the equality of other religions in the United States, right? Not really. They kind of believe that every other religion is a false religion, and that the protections of the separation of church and state don't apply to other religions besides Christianity. Usually, some of them go really far, and they will even extend that to other versions of Christianity. So not just some of them will say things like, say, Episcopalians or something aren't real Christians, right? Or they'll say Mormons. They all really seem to hate Mormons for some reason, right? Another one is Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. They'll kind of lump those guys in with like non-Christians, with pagans and stuff. And the last thing that they all share, they endorse theocratic visions. They believe biblical law, the Ten Commandments and so on, should be the foundation for American law, and that the United States Constitution should be changed and made into a vehicle for implementing biblical law on, the federal level at least, right? Which is kind of scary. So certain things evolve out of those principles there. The big one being that you'll see it said a lot from these types of people that the Constitution doesn't apply to non-Christians. You'll hear that a lot. They'll say, okay, well, this is a Christian nation. It was made for Christians, by Christians. And that means the protections that the Constitution gives only apply to Christians. So that's kind of scary. So, and then they use that to justify laws that discriminate against people of other religions, and then also discriminate against, gay people, trans people, black people, minorities, stuff like that. They'll use it as an excuse to get rid of social programs. It's funny how the Christians, the people that are commanded by their religion to go out and help the poor and stuff, they're always the ones that like really hate poor people for some reason. Anyway, so it kind of started. I mean, there always has been this sort of undercurrent of this going throughout the history of the United States. There's always been people that kind of believed that Christians were their own separate entity and should get special treatment under the law, that kind of thing. You could argue also that during the Middle Ages, this is kind of like how the Western world was run. The governments in the Middle Ages were essentially dominionist, and that saying that they were like borderline theocracies in a lot of countries, right? The Catholic Church, for example, had a lot of power in the Middle Ages in Europe, and so you could kind of call that a dominionist, model of what would happen if these people actually got in charge, and they end up burning people at the stake and shit like that, inquisitions, etc. So, this is dangerous stuff, right? But the modern Dominionist movement kind of started in the late 70s, right? With some roots going back a little bit before that. And the main person responsible for what we call Dominionism today is a guy named R.J. Rushtoony, right? He was a very prominent preacher and author. He wrote something like 50 books, all about religious stuff, religious philosophy and Christianity, blah, 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 blah. And he was a proponent of a form of theocracy called theonomy, right? Which is a form of Christian theocracy. And basically, theonomy is essentially kind of the Christian Taliban, right? It's this idea that, Christian law should supersede secular law, right? And it would say that, only the government is only there to protect Christians, so non-Christians would not have the right to vote. Let alone they wouldn't have very many rights at all. A little bit about this guy, R.J. Rushtoony. Let me just kind of scroll down to my notes here. He was a libertarian politically, which is no surprise. He was very much a vocal proponent of homeschooling, right? Which is also not a big surprise. A lot of people that homeschool their children for religious reasons, or a lot of people that homeschool their children in the United States at least tend to do it for religious reasons. That being, like, for example, they don't want their kid learning about evolution, right? They don't want them learning about sex ed, that kind of thing. So that really, didn't surprise me at all to learn that homeschooling started with these like wacky religious people, or it started, the guy that wanted to like make biblical law, permanent, right, and enforce it through the secular authority of government. Doesn't surprise me that he would be like, influential in getting homeschooling off the ground in this country. He apparently did really, really, really not like democracy. Just really doesn't like democracy, apparently. He wrote a couple of books about how democracy sucks. And was apparently also a big-time racist. And he believed that interracial marriage should be illegal. So, although he also apparently would... officiate at mixed marriage, marriages, right? And according to his son, the reason why he did that is because the Bible doesn't specifically outlaw interracial marriage. It doesn't actually say anywhere in the Bible, according to him, that interracial marriage is a sin. So it was just his personal preference, so he would still marry people who were of mixed marriage, and then like privately complain about it afterwards. So sounds like a real nice guy. He also really didn't like gay people. He believed that marriage between Christians and non-Christians should be illegal. No surprise there. What else we got here? And the last thing about R.J. Rushtoony is that apparently the guy was a big-time Holocaust denier, and wrote a couple of books where he cited conspiracy theorists and stuff like that, claiming that the usual number of people that they say died, roughly 6 million, claim, claiming that number was as low as 896,000 people, and that most of those people were not gassed in gas chambers, but instead died through, pandemics. So, yeah, sounds like a real swell guy. Racist, Holocaust denier, homophobe. That's who's starting off our Christian Reconstructionism movement here. So sorry if I didn't mention that. Christian Reconstructionism is the probably the biggest movement when it comes to Dominionism, and that's the name of the movement that R.J. Rushdoony began. I don't know if I mentioned that. Anyway, so yeah, he was one of the early proponents of this, along with a guy named Gary North. And according to Christian Reconstructionism, right, it's the idea that all of society should be dismantled, right, and reconstructed with the Christians in charge, with the government being run along biblical lines, right? So, according to Reconstructionism, all civil governments must refrain from coercion in areas where the scripture has not prescribed their intervention. So that basically means no taxes, right? Because you got to remember, also this guy was a big time libertarian as well. Libertarians really hate taxes. So yeah, the Bible says no income tax, right? So that was his big thing there. And basically the government would be limited to criminal matters, courts, and national defense, which is kind of like the go-to libertarian argument for a government. That's usually what they say, So no regulation of business, no social programs, right? So government not helping poor people, not helping homeless people, none of that stuff. No government inspecting your food, your medicine, your water supplies, right? Managing forests, none of that. None of that stuff. The only thing the government is supposed to do is, provide police to throw you in jail, and courts to allow you to sue each other, and an army so that you can bomb other people. That's it. Everything else, according to this form of Christian Dominionism, should be handled by the church. So, yeah, you're hungry, you go to the church. And you know what? What if you're not a Christian? Too bad. Right? Gotta be a Christian. That's what we're talking about here, folks, right? Kind of sounds like a little bit like a hyper-libertarian hellhole to me, Kind of sounds like the opposite of freedom, but we could talk about that some other time. Maybe that might be a good idea for a stream, to do a stream about the beginnings of the modern libertarian movement. We could talk about Ron Paul. We could talk about all the, wacky libertarian nutbags and their incredibly toxic ideas of how they would totally destroy society if they actually get in charge. But anyway, maybe we'll do that in the stream coming up. So anyway, there was a R.J. Rushdoony's theology was mostly inspired by Calvinism, right? Which I won't go into too much detail about what Calvinism is, but one of the big things about Calvinism is that they believe salvation is predestined, right? So they believe that since God is omnipotent, then that must mean that he knows everything that will ever happen, ever. And so that also means he knows who's going to hell and who's going to heaven even before they're born, which kind of doesn't really line up. I mean, if you think about it, it doesn't line up with a benevolent God. If God is supposed to be benevolent, then that would mean that, and God knew who's going to hell before they were born, then wouldn't God want to save those people from their torment and thus prevent them from being born? doesn't really match up with a benevolent God. But then again, you could say, well, then that would mean that God would have to not know who is going to hell and heaven before they're born, so he's not omnipotent, so can't really have an omnipotent God without him being cruel. You know, that's kind of one of those paradoxes that pop up if you actually try to make sense of this religious stuff. Right. Which, me personally, I think it's better just to not think about it because it's all bullshit, but whatever. Anyway, you know, I guess I'm not really an atheist myself. I'm more of an agnostic, but anyway, but this is not about me. This is about Christian Dominionism. So they also believe that there's a limited atonement, according to Calvinism. So that means that only the sins of the elect were atoned by Jesus' death, right? As opposed to most other mainstream Christians who believe that the entire world was covered by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And all you have to do is believe and say you believe and become a Christian, and then you'll be saved. According to Calvinists, that's not true. That means only the elite, right? Only the people that God had elected before they were born will ever be saved. So some of the people who say they're saved now will not really be saved. So kind of opens the door for justifications for a lot of mistreatment of people, you know. And people have used this sort of this philosophy to rationalize things like slavery, you know, war, capital punishment for sure, because it's like if you're just going to hell anyway, and if God made you specifically with the idea that you're going to hell, then you don't really need to, you know, be nice to people because they're just hellbound anyway. Right? You don't need to, you know, if all the people you're keeping as slaves are predestined to go to hell anyway because they're not part of the elites, that makes it a lot easier to keep them in bondage and treat them as animals, and etc., etc. So yeah, been used as a justification for some bad stuff. That's kind of one of the main influences. So this guy R.J. Rushtoony wasn't, of course, a strict Calvinist, but one of the influences on his theology there. You know, it sounds like the more you talk about him, he was a much nicer and nicer guy. Let's see. So he also supported, of course, segregation. He said, speaking of slavery, R.J. Rushtoony made comments to the effect that slavery wasn't so bad, that it was, you know, a benevolent institution. You know, we talked about this a lot during our stream last week about, you know, about neo-Confederates. This is one of the things that they'll often say to try to make it sound like it was okay, to make it sound like, you know, slaves loved their masters, blah, 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 or, you know, slave masters treated their slaves as part of their family, etc., etc. You know, all the different ways that racists used to bullshit themselves into thinking they weren't the bad guys during the Civil War, and that slavery was, you know, slavery was a benevolent institution, just like how bad those people have it in Africa right now, etc., etc. So yeah, R.J. Rushtoony was one of those guys. Let's see, he wrote a couple of books. Oh wait, let's see, did I cover all this stuff yet? Let me just kind of scroll up here, blah, blah, blah. So another part of Christian Reconstructionism is that they are biblical literalists in the purest sense of the word. They believe every word of the Bible because the Bible is, of course, the only way that God is able to, you know, communicate with people. So it all must be true, right? So that just doesn't mean the New Testament. That means everything in the Old Testament is true too. So the flood, you know, the Tower of Babel, Adam and Eve, you know, all of the things that that are scientifically impossible or have been disproved, all of that stuff's true. So they're very, they tend to be young earth creationists, right? You know, they reject evolution, they reject even for a long time, apparently some of these people actually reject the, heliocentric model of the solar system. Although that's kind of lost the fight on that one, right? But that's sort of made a comeback, and believe it or not, in the last 10 to 15 years, that along with the flat Earth people, right? The whole idea that the Earth is the center of the universe, that's kind of made a comeback because of religious people that, because that's what it says in the Bible, essentially. Right. I mean, he doesn't straight up explicitly say it, but if you, kind of put the theology, if you put the verses together and draw logical conclusions from what they say, basically says the Earth is the center of the universe. So, lots of, yeah. So they also tend to be very anti-science for those particular reasons, at least when it comes to things like evolution and, So you see a big crossover with these people between, climate deniers, right? Anti-vaxxers, right? That kind of thing, Big crossovers here because obviously all science must be like, dominated by Satan worshipping pagans or whatnot, and that's why recycling your soda cans and driving an electric car or something is bad. Right. So let's see. I need to make this smaller. I'm painting with too big of a brush. All right. A little bit better. Okay. So where were we? Yeah, R.J. Rushtoony. Sounds like a very nice guy. And like all racist, homophobic, Holocaust-denying pieces of shit, he gets to live to be 96. So, he died in, he lived, I think he lived to be something like that, like 96 or he lived until his 90s. Born in, or maybe his late 80s, like 87, some shit like that. So he gets to live to be, a nice, long, fruitful life, spending decades spreading hate and fear, because that's just what happens when you're a racist piece of fucking garbage in the United States. You get to live a super long life and die fat and happy, having done everything you've ever wanted in your entire life, and, ruining everybody else's life in the meantime. So he finally kicked the bucket in 2001. Good riddance. But his movement, of course, lives on. Let's see. So he wrote a couple of books here, the most famous of which are a few. One's called Law and Liberty, and then also the Institutes of Biblical Law. And in these two books, basically, he makes the case for theonomy in the United States. This is where you get the... This is where you get him saying his anti-democratic stuff. He really, really, really didn't like democracy. Oh, excuse me. And, from reading just kind of the snippets that they put in there, his criticism of democracy is the usual kind of stupid libertarian bullshit, where they say stuff like, oh, the rule of the majority, means that, it's the wolves talking to the sheep about what they're going to eat for dinner. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. 51% being a tyranny over the remaining 49%, etc., etc. And it's the usual kind of ridiculous, misleading libertarian horse crap when it comes to democracy, where they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So, that's kind of bullshit. But yet he seemed to like the Republic version, the Republic style government. He seemed to endorse that more. He said that in these books he lays out the case for how to institute biblical law on a wide scale in the United States, essentially. And he encouraged also, he supported also all of the biblical punishments one would get for various crimes. which includes capital punishment, right? So, I don't know if you've ever read the Bible. The Bible is not a very nice book. Lots of bad things happen to people in the Bible all the time. And the list of things that people get, killed for is pretty wide and varied. And if you were to actually institute anything like that in the United States today, it would basically turn us into a theocratic hellhole. Among the things in the Bible that you can get put to death for is homosexuality, open homosexuality. If you're gay, you can be stoned to death, Also, witchcraft. So, yeah, no Santeria, no, Wicca, nothing like that. That's all illegal, and you will be put to death for any of those types of things, right? In speaking with lots of Christians over the years about this, they tend to lump all New Age religions together as witchcraft, essentially. Even those parts of those types of New Age stuff that have a heavy Christian influence, those also would not be spared the stonings. Keep that in mind also. Let's see, what else? Blasphemy, open blasphemy, can get you murdered in the Bible, right? You can get put to death for that. Proselytizing other religions besides Christianity is considered idolatry in the Bible. That will have you put to death for that as well. So, spreading false religions. So, any other religion besides their brand of Christianity will have you put to death. And remember, it's not just, it's other forms of Christianity as well. So if you were to, be a Unitarian, what do they call it? Unitarian or something like that. And they don't like that. That's also one that you could get put to death for. Right? So it's not just being a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist or something that'll have you get put to death for. It's like if you're, a Jehovah's Witness or a Seventh-day Adventist or some shit like that, you will also get put to death according to Christian Reconstructionists. That also includes, like things like Baptists and Methodists and Catholics, Episcopalians, etc. All of those would be included under idolatry. Right. So, of course, there's the usual crimes of homicide and kidnapping, that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, okay, that's to be expected, right? Then it starts getting crazy. We already mentioned, homosexuality. We mentioned spreading, preaching other religions. Bestiality is another one that you will go to, the electric chair for, right? So, yeah, that's horrible and shit, but, do we normally execute people that engage in bestiality? They go to prison, right? So, I don't know. Maybe some people wouldn't object to that one. Violating the Sabbath, you will get the death penalty for that. So, there is a verse in the Bible where a guy is cold, wants to start a fire. He picks up sticks on the Sabbath, and they stone him to death for that because he wanted to start a fire to warm himself up, possibly cook some food. Not allowed to do that on Sundays, except in real life the Sabbath is on Saturdays, so keep that in mind too. If you are a Christian or you have a Christian family and they say keep the Sabbath, they are actually keeping the wrong day as the Sabbath. So, they could go to hell for that. Anyway, so worshiping other gods, of course. Male homosexuality is the thing that will get people killed. There doesn't seem to be a punishment in the Bible for female homosexuality. So, lesbians, you're A-okay. There you go. Make of that what you will. Let's see, what else we got? Lots of stuff about acting out against your parents. So, striking your parents or cursing your parents. Both of those things are treated equally, and you will get the death penalty for both of those. So, not just punching your parents or something like that, fighting back, whatever, or even like abusing your parents, but just, you know, being disobedient, cursing at them, saying something like, fuck you, mom, right? That gets you stoned to death in the Bible. That's bad. We said witchcraft. We already talked about that one. Here's a big one. Adultery. Adultery will get you the death penalty in the Bible. Now, the thing about that is that, can you imagine if that was actually the law? I mean, everybody out there who's ever cheated in their relationship, cheated on a spouse, I'm happy to say that I have never, ever, 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 ever cheated on my wife. And if I did, she would be justified in blowing my head off and throwing me off a bridge. Right? But I would never do that shit to begin with anyway, I am happily married. However, there are millions and millions of people out there who have cheated on their wives and their husbands. It happens all the time. People hook up. That's what happens. They go out, you get married, blah, blah, blah. You've been married for somebody for 15 years, whatever. It's getting old. You meet a girl at your office, some shit happens, whatever. That happens all the time. People cheat on each other. People get divorced all the time, etc., etc. People cheat on each other and then they reconcile. And then they don't get divorced. And then they go on and they live for dozens of years or whatever. Right. So how many people would we have to execute? Right? Like, it would be like a 24-hour stream of people in they'd have to bust out the train cars in order to keep, the number of people guilty of adultery. If we're going to enact God's law here, that's what it would take. I mean, Jesus Christ. Holy shit, right? Including, I might add, several prominent Christian Dominionists, would also be included upon this, as well as presidents, I mean, Donald Trump, for fuck's sake, cheated on every wife he's been married to, and he's been married to, what, 3? Right? Had sex with a porn star with the, while his current wife was pregnant with their young son. He's like banging porn stars and shit. I mean, come on. This is what we're talking about here. We're talking about putting those people to death. There wouldn't be any fucking people left in the whole goddamn country. Anyway, so yeah, that was some funny shit. What else we got here? Impersonating a priest will get you thrown, get you killed. As well as lying about one's virginity. Okay. But only for women. Because men can just lie about their there's no punishment for that. In fact, there's no punishment for men in the Bible having sex outside of marriage at all. Several times men have sex with women who are not their wives, with their handmaidens, stuff like that. That happens all the fucking time. There's even a story somewhere, I should have wrote it down, but I took note of this when I was doing this research about a woman who was about to be stoned to death for harlotry, being a prostitute. And she was pregnant, and she wasn't even the wife of the guy who was going to kill her. And then she proves that the baby is actually the guy that wants to kill her. She proves the baby that she's pregnant with is his. And then suddenly, that judgment gets reversed. It's like, oh, okay, so you're complaining about her having sex outside of marriage when you're the one having sex with her. And it's like, and it was his sister-in-law, so it wasn't even his wife that he was married to. It was his wife's sister. It's like the most hypocritical shit ever. I wish I would have wrote that down. I'll have to find the verse for that and put it in the thing after the stream. But that one blew me away when I was reading about this, yesterday. I was like, holy fuck, like, that's like the most hypocritical shit of all time. Right? Anyway, so that's some fucking bad shit. Of course, the methods of capital punishment in the Old Testament are not very nice. No electric chair, no firing squad, no lethal injection. It's stoning is the big one, you know, which stoning usually meant that somebody would be buried up to their head and then just their head sticking out over the ground there, and then people would just throw rocks at them until they died. So getting bludgeoned to death with huge rocks while you're buried all the way up to your head in the ground. The second most popular method of capital punishment in the Bible is burning someone alive. Very, very compassionate there. Someone is also put to death by the sword once as an execution. So hey, there you go. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll just get that, and they'll just chop your head off, and it'll be quick and easy. Something tells me most likely not. So this is what Christian Dominionists, specifically R.J. Rushtoony, want for the rest of us. They wanted, all of the biblical punishments to be enacted and enforced by secular law. And I just want to kind of take a minute, just think about that for a second. Here's a guy who's supposed to be a libertarian, right? Libertarians are supposed to basically not like government and not like any kind of authoritarian government specifically. That's the whole, every libertarian you talk to, they won't shut the hell up about how, places like Soviet Russia and etc. were authoritarian hellholes. And, they just want to live their life, blah, 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 and they don't want to pay. Of course, according to these people, authoritarian usually means taxes, and they don't like paying taxes for shit. Here's a guy that was part of the libertarian movement, big time, and yet he wants to have the government, the United States government, stone people to death for things like, adultery. I mean, I don't know how that shit's supposed to square. How do you make sense of that? How can you be a libertarian and not like authoritarian governments, but also think at the same time that the government should be allowed to execute you for cheating on your wife or cheating on your husband or having sex before marriage? This is what these people want. So yeah, that's some scary shit. There was another guy, one of the other big proponents of theonomy, as well as Christian Reconstructionism, is a guy named Gary North. Gary North is still alive. He is still with us. He's 76 years old or some shit like that. And yeah, he's a Dominionist. Let me see here. These little things bother me. Gotta get rid of that. Okay. He is also a very, very, very prolific writer. Has written something like 50 books all about theology and Christianity, blah, blah, blah. And his big thing is that he's an economist, right? And he wants what's called Christian economics to be the standard, in the Western world. And Christian economics is basically, this guy also is a big-time libertarian too. So Christian economics is essentially a libertarian wet dream of economics. So going back to the gold standard, abolishing the Federal Reserve, abolishing fractional reserve banking in general. He believes that the Bible forbids inflation, and also interest rates, things like that, charging interest, usury, right? So how do you have a bank that doesn't charge interest? How's the bank supposed to make money? I don't know. I mean, I'm not defending banks here. I'm just saying maybe this shit isn't as, maybe they haven't really thought it out as well as they think they have. He also believes that all welfare programs should be outlawed, which is a thing that all of these guys tend to believe. And it's not just, Christian Reconstructionists, but libertarians in general believe that there should be no help at all for anybody at any time for anything. And I don't really understand how being a Christian kind of matches up with this idea that you're not supposed to help anyone, Because I think I remember reading some stuff in the Bible about how you should treat poor people nicely and you should let strangers into your home and stuff like that. And when people are hungry and starving, you should feed them, etc., etc., etc. And so I don't see, how that makes sense. How it's like, I don't know. Seems to be a little bit of a contradiction that when your religion commands you to help people, yet you outlaw any method of actually helping them. I guess they think that should all just go through churches or whatever. Right? So it's like, okay, take the tax dollars that you were paying that would go to help homeless people and help feed people and help keep children in school and stuff like that, and give it to people like Pat Robertson and Creflo Dollar so that they can go buy private fucking jets with them and stuff like that, and then maybe like set up a soup kitchen that only feeds Christians, like one day a week or some shit. Right? That's what really happens when you give money to churches. It's like, yeah, God said I need a fucking private jet or else I'm gonna die. God, who was that? That was Creflo Dollar, I think. Anyway, Creflo Dollar, if you don't know, is one of those TV minister assholes who basically rips people off, convinces old people to send them their entire fucking social security check and shit like that, and then said some shit about how God said that he needs a fucking brand new private jet or something because apparently God doesn't fly first class or even coach. So that was some funny shit. I don't know. Isn't there some stuff in the Bible about how a rich man will never get through get into heaven? Like camel and the eye of a needle, shit like that. And doesn't that seem a little strange? All of these fucking televangelists and shit with their giant mansions and their 500,000 seat capacity fucking stadiums and shit completely full of wailing people, sending them their everlast fucking penny and stuff like that, so some rich piece of shit can fly around in a toy jet. I don't know. Anyway, seems just a little hypocritical to me. Let's see. This guy, Gary North, getting back to him, believes in all of the same shit, believes he should be put to death for all of the same things, that R.J. Rushdoony said you should get put to death for. However, he thinks that the working on the Sabbath thing no longer applies somehow. So I guess, I don't know, maybe that's a New Testament thing. So yeah, at least you won't get put to death for going to work on Sunday. I guess they got to keep that open so that people can go hit up the Denny's and shit after they go to church on Sunday or whatever, right? Excuse me. So, just slightly better there. He said, let's see, what else? He says that the only capital punishment that should be carried out is by stoning, because it's the biblically approved method of execution, and it's cheap due to the plentiful and convenient supply of stones that's all over the place. Very, very Christian, mighty Christian of you there, buddy. He was very, very homophobic, anti-gay here. One of the quotes I found from this guy, Gary North, is that he said, "God is indeed a homophobe." That's a very telling thing. Another big famous quote by this guy, Gary North. We must use the doctrine of religious liberty to gain independence for Christian schools until we train up a generation of people who know that there is no religious neutrality, no neutral law, no neutral education, and no neutral civil government. Then they will get busy in constructing a Bible-based social, political, and religious order which finally denies the religious liberty of the enemies of God. So basically saying we should just use the freedom of religion granted by the Constitution in order to train up people who will one day abolish the freedom of religion for everybody who's not Christian. So that I thought was worth mentioning here, because that is something you see from a lot of right-wing people. You know, a lot of racists, you know, right-wing activists, Nazi types, things like that. They have no problem using the trappings of the Constitution for their own ends, but make no mistake, once they get in charge, all that shit's going away. It reminds me of something Jared Taylor said. So Jared Taylor is, you know, one of the, basically this neo-Nazi sack of shit, who's one of the big voices in the alt-right nowadays. And during an interview that I saw on YouTube with him, he basically, like, he was asked about freedom of speech, you know, because they were talking about freedom of speech and how it's wrong to cancel people. And at the time, the big thing was conservative speakers getting kicked out of universities, you know. That was a big thing for a little bit, you know, people like Milo Yiannopoulos and shit, like, getting denied, not being able to talk and stuff at universities, shit like that. And they brought up this thing, they go, well, you know, do you actually believe in freedom of speech yourself? And he's like, and he looked and kind of said, no, not really. And, you know, so that's the thing. It's like, yeah, they're using freedom of speech in order to spread their rhetoric. They got no problem doing that. But once they take over, you know, once they're effective and they are running shit, they will take that away in a nanosecond for the rest of us. And here's this guy, Gary North, basically saying that same thing. You know, let's fill that real quick instead of, that looks funny. Let's see. Maybe this alien dude is like, he's like the guy that dropped out of school. You know, like, maybe he was the foreign exchange student, you know, when everybody else was in school, and he's the foreign exchange student from Venus or whatever, and then he had to go back halfway through the middle of the year, so he didn't get to graduate with his friends. And that way he didn't get an invite to the reunion, so now he's just sort of looking and going, guys, you remember me? Remember me? I was there for a semester. And they're like, they totally don't remember him. See, we're creating backstories here, man. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, anyway. Let's see. A couple more things about Gary North here. He also apparently really thought that Y2K was going to kickstart the apocalypse, right? One of the quotes that he had about Y2K, apparently, okay, this is what he said. The Y2K crisis is systemic. It cannot possibly be fixed. I think it will wipe out every national government in the West. Not just modify them, destroy them. That is what I've that is what I've wanted all my adult life. In my view, Y2K is our deliverance. So he really, really thought that, you know, on January 1st, 2000, as soon as the clock ticked over, that all the computers were going to go wacky and nuclear bombs were going to go flying all over the place. Must have been very, very disappointed when the apocalypse didn't actually happen. But just think about what he just said there too. It's like, this is what I've been waiting for my entire adult life, for, you know, the civilization to collapse, right? And think about what would actually, you know, like, what would actually happen if let's say all of the bad shit that they were talking about actually did happen, you know, like Y2K, which, you know, looking back 20 years later, it's like, yeah, okay, everybody was, flipping out over nothing. It really didn't cause any problems whatsoever. But it got sensationalized, and even at that time, like I remember thinking about it, I'm like, why would just the clock on the computer like getting fucked up? Like, why would that cause all this shit? I mean, the thing is, I'm not a supercomputer smarty myself, but I know enough about them. I mean, I do work in IT, right, as my day job, and I know enough about them. Even back in 2001, I knew there wasn't going to be any fucking problem like this. But who knew? Who knows? Maybe it could have caused some shit. But think about, like, what that guy just said. This is what I've been waiting for my entire adult life. So they're basically waiting for the end of the world, and in a lot of way, a lot of millennialists, that's what they call that, millennial, like basically the Christians who think that the world is going to end any minute now, and at any given moment, Jesus will come flying back on a cloud, and the final battle for Armageddon is going to start, in Israel, and blah 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 blah, and then the rapture will happen, and all this other shit, right? Those people, like, basically have been kind of, they're waiting for the end of the world, right? Which would necessitate the end of the world. Basically, you can't have the end of the world without wanton death and destruction and mass slaughter. This is kind of why all these people support Israel so much. The state of Israel. It's because they need there to be an Israel in order for the end of the world to happen, because the final battle is supposed to happen in Israel, and all of the Jews are supposed to die. So they support the nation of Israel because Israel has to be there to get destroyed during the end of the world, so Jesus can finally come back and, like, fucking, I don't know, put Donald Trump back on Twitter or something, right? Outlaw abortion and stop teaching critical race theory in schools or some shit. Whatever Jesus is supposed to do when he comes back finally. So, like, yeah, this is what, that's what that quote is. This is what I've been waiting for my entire adult life. I've been waiting, he's been waiting his entire adult life for millions upon millions of people to die. Right? So that way they can take over in the aftermath, and make it illegal to cheat on your spouse or whatever, right? Which is some disturbing shit. And that kind of makes it, we need to make this darker out here. Let's just take that. There we go. Yeah. Should we keep it blue? Nah, let's make his thing blue here. Like a dark blue. Alright. Anyway, so that's, and then you think about, like, well, a lot of these people are in government, so maybe it's not in their best interest in order for us to have a functioning government. And it starts making sense. You start thinking about, like, if you kind of examine the long-term strategy of Christian conservatives, and not just in the Republican Party, although the Republican Party seems to be dominated by these people, but also in the Democratic Party as well. These people also have an influence in the Democratic Party. There's also evangelical Christian conservatives in the Democratic Party, right? And, just not as many, but they really, really, really seem to have a stranglehold on the Republicans in this country, right? And you started looking at their voting, records and the things they support, and the things they do to cripple the ability for us to have a functioning government. And then you look at quotes like this and you start thinking, well, that makes a little bit of sense. Maybe their goal isn't for us to actually have a functioning government. Maybe their goal is not for us to be able to pass laws and address issues and stuff like that. Maybe they want shit to collapse, Maybe they keep cutting taxes for rich people and not providing anything for poor people, and setting up these bubbles, these economic bubbles, because they want the economy to collapse. Maybe that's their plan. Maybe they want to collapse it so that fucking civilization fucking collapses, so that they can come in and sort of take over afterwards and institute their real life version of the fucking Handmaid's Tale. Right? Mm. Kind of disturbing shit, you know. Makes a little bit more sense. But that's the thing, is that, you know, there's no manifesto, there's no plan. You know what I mean? Like, you can read stuff like R.J. Rushdoony's books or whatever, get a general overarching, you know, vision of what these people have in mind, but it's not like they're not a terrorist organization. There's no, like, you know what I mean? There's no specific organization where these people come from, where they all get these ideas. It's just sort of, it cuts across religious, like, it cuts across, like, denominational lines, you know, and it's more of just like a general philosophy, you know, of let's fuck everything up so that we can take over. I mean, I don't know. Kind of makes sense to me. It makes sense that this is what they would want to do. Let's see. Let's grab this again, and let's put that behind this window also. There we go, because, you know, that's outside. Let's fill that. And then we can come up here and actually put some broken glass up in here. Okay. So anyway, where were we? Kind of lost track there. So yeah, that's essentially Christian Dominionism. That's the biggest form of Dominionism, or well, no, Christian Reconstructionism, excuse me. That's the biggest form of Dominionism in the country that affects us. There are some other forms. There is Catholic integralism. Catholic integralism. There we go. Which is essentially the Catholic version of Christian Reconstructionism, right? They are, you know, it's essentially gone, although it's sort of made a comeback. And basically what this was a, you know, during the Renaissance with the rise of liberalism, this was a reaction of the Catholic Church against the rise of liberalism, right? And when I say liberalism, I mean the political philosophy of liberalism, not, you know, not a liberal, like what we would call, you know, a Democrat, a liberal Democrat or something. Talking about the actual political philosophy of liberalism, which is, you know, a moral philosophy based on the rule of law and consent of the governed and equality before the law. So, you know, democracy, secularism, stuff like that. Freedom of the press, freedom of religion, etc. They're basically all of the, you know, standards of what the Western world is based on. You know, the idea that you should be free and that you should have the ability to vote and determine your government, stuff like that. And, you know, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, that kind of thing. You know, these are the principles through which Western democracies are, you know, founded upon, right? And that's what Christian integralism was. I mean, Catholic integralism was sort of formed in order to kind of combat that. You know, to plant in the minds of people the idea that this stuff was wrong and it was satanic, blah, blah, blah. And what we really should do is get back to how shit was during the Middle Ages when the Catholic Church ran everything. So that's essentially kind of gone away. Of course, you know, it failed. But, like all bad ideas, it never truly dies, and there are people in Europe trying to bring that back. And they're kind of partnering with their, oh shit, that's the eraser. Kind of partnering with their, you know, Protestant allies in trying to basically institute some, you know, tear down those walls between the church and state. Although they're very much more active in Europe, in particular Spain, Portugal, you know, France, right around there. So you don't really see this so much in the United States. The main reason being is that there's a lot of distrust in you know, Protestant sort of Christian, like, political circles in the United States, they also seem to distrust Catholics a lot, you know, which was something that I didn't know about. I kind of started just like learning about this when I was doing research for my stream about the Ku Klux Klan. You know, I never realized how like much discrimination there was in the United States against Catholics before, and yeah, apparently, I mean, it was pretty bad. It doesn't seem to be something you see so much anymore nowadays, but you know, then again, I really don't know. I mean, I'm supposed to be a Roman Catholic. But, you know, I'm obviously not. I haven't been to a church in years. You know what I mean? So I probably have not experienced any discrimination against it. But still, it definitely seemed to be in the past to be something that was a lot more prevalent nowadays. And you do see it also from the sort of evangelical crowd, you know, the same type of QAnon type people, you know, the people who tend to believe in creationism and the idea that you know, Jewish space lasers, those types of people. You do kind of see it still there. You know, they think that the Catholic Church isn't a real church. You know, they'll call it an institution. They think the Pope is like, you know, secretly fucking, you know, making deals with demons and stuff like that. So there is a little bit. There's distrust, I guess, from some of the more wacky, you know, segments of the Christian right in the United States. So that's why you don't really see, you know, this Catholic integralism so much in the U.S. Although it does exist, it's just very, very weak, you know. But apparently it's a much more bigger thing that you see in Europe. You know what we should do here? We should take this color and we should get this and we should draw a little circle and put it right there. And then we should fill that, right? Then we should draw another circle. Let's see. That looks pretty good. Then we should delete that. We should bring this down a little bit. Then a trick for you guys: in order to quickly copy a layer, all you have to do is hold the Alt key and then drag, and then that copies your layer. Pretty cool, huh? It does make this stuff faster when you can, you know, when you know the shortcuts like that. Then we're going to go to Filter, and we're going to go to Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. And let's just blur that just a little bit. There we go. And now we got a moon outside. Okay, and then we can just, let's see, we can merge that down there. Let's merge this down, merge down, merge down. There, so now that's on the same layer as that. Pretty cool, huh? Let's see, what else we got to do? Oh yeah, windowsill. You have to color in this windowsill. Let's just take the same color as this. Anyway, I should be talking. I'm like drawing and shit. Where was I? We're talking about Catholic. I think we're pretty much done with the Catholic portion of this. Okay, so there is one more form of Christian Dominionism that is worth mentioning, called Kingdom Now theology. And this is, so whereas you know, Christian Reconstructionism tends to be the sort of racist, kind of segregationist, like, you know, wing of this, right? You know, the libertarian wing, that tends to be Christian Reconstructionism. These guys, the Kingdom Now people, are basically the TV preachers, right? The revivalists, the charismatic Christians is what they call those, right? These are the guys that are going on TV, the 700 Club, you know, people that are like saying, put your you know, put your hands on the TV screen and pray with me for Jesus, blah blah blah. You know, these are the guys that are saying shit like, you know, Jesus chose Donald Trump to fucking, you know, as his vessel to bring about the apocalypse, stuff like that. You know, they're very much heavily invested in conspiracy theories. Um, and there is a lot of overlap between these groups too. There are people who are Kingdom Now people who are also Christian Reconstructionists. You know, there's a lot of people who are like, you know, they all tend to be libertarians for some reason. I don't know how that shit works, you know. So you have the usual stuff that far right conservatives usually believe in, you know, very much in support of the Second Amendment, you know, that kind of thing. They're very anti-tax, you know. They're let's see, also very anti-gay. They really hate gay people. They really do not like trans people. They think that things like, you know, pretty much anything a Democratic candidate or politician does is like of the devil, right? You know, these are the people that flip their fucking lid when, you know, the Common Core math was introduced into schools. These people just couldn't fucking handle it and called it like a satanic conspiracy and all this shit, you know, stuff like that. So, yeah, that's what we're talking about here. This is the Kingdom Now people, right? Are like the straight up fucking lunatics, is what they are. Anyway, so they basically, you know, they grew out of Pentecostalism in the 60s and 70s, you know, and kind of came into prominence in the 1980s, right, with these television ministries and stuff like that. Although the television ministries have been a thing for years, it really took off during the 80s, like a lot. That's when you started getting these mega churches, you know, these basically corporate churches is what they are, where, excuse me, these giant mega churches that'll have, like, you know, they'll be held in stadiums, or they'll build like these massive giant buildings that hold like 100,000 people or whatever, and you know, they're essentially like TV preachers and shit, right? That's where all this stuff started. It started really taking off during the 1980s. You know, the 700 Club type people. So they believe they also grew out of a movement that goes all the way back to the 50s, I think, called it was called the Latter Rain movement, you know, and that sort of started, you know, with these sort of tent revivalist type things. So back in the day, like before they had TV and radio ministries, what these guys would do is that, you know, these sort of fucking hucksters, right? Because in my opinion, all these guys are scam artists. They're religious scam artists. You know, these are the people that drive around and you know, try to you know, lay hands on people and claim that they're healing the sick, shit like that. They're basically fucking scam artists, in my opinion. What these people would do, you know, I think it started even before that. Like that sort of like charismatic movement started at the beginning of the century, the 20th century. And they would drive around and set up tents. You know, they'd have a revivalist thing, and they would go out and kind of like the same way a circus would, you know. And the thing is that a lot of these small towns around the country, right, not really much happens in the Midwest, you know, in what we would call flyover country in the United States, you know, Idaho and shit like that, you know. Especially during the early 20th century, there were lots of little towns all over the place. Little mining towns, little farming towns, things like that, you know. Towns that would have just a couple hundred people, that kind of thing. So when something like this shows up and sets up tents, right, it becomes this spectacle because there's nothing to do out in those places, right? So the whole town would show up. And, most of them would be Christians anyway. And, it was very much a big thing. You'd go and the guy would preach about, fire and brimstone. And then people would get up and they'd be dancing. And you would get things like people speaking in tongues, stuff like that. Because according to the Kingdom Now people, the spiritual gifts have been reinstated in the church. So here's the thing, okay? So people often ask, like, okay, well, Christians, you see this question a lot. Jesus could do miracles, and Jesus says that people should, in his name, be able to do miracles, right? And in the Bible, in Acts and stuff, all of the apostles do miracles. But how come we can't do miracles today, right? Because it says in the Bible, people, Jesus says that you'll have the same abilities that I have, and you'll be able to walk on water and turn, water into wine and bread into fishes and raise people from the dead, shit like that. All the miracles that Jesus did. He says that you can do these things too if you believe in me, in the Bible. And people obviously today can't do those things, so why not? And the explanation for that is what's called the spiritual gifts, right? Which are basically superpowers that God granted to the apostles, but has decided to take away, right? And I'm not exactly, they take away from the modern church because we don't need them anymore, is the justification, right? And I'm not exactly sure who came up with this theology. This is something that I think this even goes all the way back to, like, the beginnings of the church, right? And it was like, that's the justification. The justification is, well, now we have the church, so these were, these miracles, right? These superpowers that early church people were able to engage in were there in order to, convert people, proselytize, convert people, shit like that. And since we have a church, we don't need those anymore because we can just use our church to convert people. So we don't have to give them proof that all this shit's real. Which kind of, if you think about it, if you really wanted to convince somebody that your religion is real, there's nothing like bringing a guy back from the dead in order to prove it's real, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but if somebody said, hey, my religion is real and I can prove it, and then he, like, shoots a dude in the head and then does a magic trick and brings the guy back to life, that might get me to convert. Right? If he started walking on water right in front of me when everybody else is falling in and sinking, if he is able to produce, 500 pieces of, sandwiches out of a fucking empty box and, like, feed all the homeless people in my city, I might call that a miracle. I might actually decide, like, that kind of looks like proof to me. I might join, right? So, but no, of course, those things are fantasy. Those things don't exist. They never existed. And, they're basically stories that people tell children, right? So that's why people cannot do those things in real life, even though the Bible says they could, because, they're made-up stories. It's like the X-Men, It's like the Avengers. It's like the Tooth Fairy. These are just things that, it was bullshit. It was bullshit that people told each other in order to make their religion sound true. Yeah, it's, oh yeah, well, Jesus is so awesome, he can walk on water. Yeah, one time he's so cool, he had, like, one fish and one loaf of bread, and he, like, multiplied it and shit, and, like, 5,000 people ate that day. It was crazy. I was there. It's all bullshit. But anyway, so according to these people, these spiritual gifts have been returned to the church, and returned to them specifically. And that's why you see all of these this is kind of been taken over in what's called the greater charismatic movement. So it kind of started with this group called Latter Rain movement, and then that sort of evolved into the charismatic movement. And these are the guys that go around, these are the guys that go around and try to claim that they can heal people, heal this child, remove these demons from this child's legs so that she can walk again, blah, blah, blah. Heal this vacuum cleaner, that kind of thing, right? That's where this shit comes from, and it's all scams. It's all bullshit. You know, these are people like there's a guy named Peter Popoff. I don't know if you've ever heard of Peter Popoff. He's a charismatic preacher that would try to heal people, and he got busted. You know, because he would claim that God sent you to me, right? And then he would like call people by their names, and then everybody would be surprised, like, oh, how did he know my name? Shit like that, right? And it turns out that what was going on is like he would when people came to his revival, they would fill out a card with their name on it, and then what they were there for, you know, if they have a sick relative or something. And then they would sit down, and he had somebody in a booth, and he had an earpiece, right? And it was assigned seating, and people would be going through these cards saying, okay, this is Mary Johnson. She's sitting in seat A7, and she's here because her mother has cancer, or some shit like that. And then Peter Popoff would like stand up and be like, Mary Johnson in seat, and then he would point at her and be like, your mother's cancer is going to be okay. She's going into remission. Hallelujah. And then everybody would be like, oh, it's Jesus talking through this guy, right? Shit like that. He got busted like on live like TV, like basically with you know, because somebody came and was intercepting the radio signals, right? That's the kind of shit I'm talking about. That's you know, charismatic, you know, Christianity, right? Peter Popoff, later on, I remember my favorite thing about this guy is, you know, he went to prison for this, for basically fucking defrauding people, gets out of prison, starts up his ministry again, goes right back to it. And I remember one time I was flipping through the channels and I saw him selling vials of miracle water, blessed by him, right? Which supposedly this miracle water came from the fountain at Lourdes or whatever, and it was blessed. And if you were just, you know, pay him a donation, if you were to donate $39.95 to his ministry, he'll send you his magical fucking miracle water. So this guy is like selling vials of magic fucking water on TV. You know, in one sense, people that fall for this shit, it's like, you know, because when you hear stuff like that, like I saw shit like that, and I usually get kind of angry at that. It's like, God, look at this fucking scam artist. But then you start thinking about it and you go, well, if anybody's actually stupid enough to fall for this shit, they kind of deserve it. You know? Lewis the Hedgehog, hey, what's going on? James Randi exposed him. Oh, okay. Awesome. So yeah, you know what you're talking about, right? Exactly. Yeah, James Randi exposed this guy, right? But anyway, like, it's sort of like, you know, anybody who's dumb enough to actually, like, give their money to these fucking people kind of deserve to get ripped off, don't they? You know, it's sort of like, well, at least they're giving their money to this asshole and they're not, like, you know, doing something dangerous with it. I don't know, donating it to a politician or something, buying a gun with it or whatever. So, but still, it's kind of like, man, you know, I got this entire, like, class of grifter fucking assholes just like ruining people's lives for decades. I don't know, it kind of says the state of what our society's in when people like this are allowed to get away with it. And to top it all off, since it's a religion, these guys don't pay any taxes on it. So they rip people off for a living, you know, by like manipulating their like fears and stuff like that, you know. Tombstone Dead Man. How you doing, man? Thanks for joining. Yes, it is. It's such a scam. Totally, you know. But anyway, like, yeah, they like do all this shit for decades. They get millions of dollars from fucking like people who are desperate, you know, who think that if they donate some money, you know, maybe like their loved ones will get saved or whatever. And then they go off and they buy fucking like private jets and mansions and shit with it, and they don't pay any taxes. And that's the shittiest part, is it's like they're rubbing it all in their faces. Like, another thing these people tend to believe in is that sort of what do you call that? Oh, god damn it, I can't remember what it's called. It's basically the prosperity gospel. That's what it is. That's where this shit came from too. This comes from New Kingdom Now theology, the prosperity gospel. You know, the idea that if you donate money to the church, it's like It's like sowing a seed, and then God will repay you, 10 times what you donated. So they go in and they tell people this shit. It's like, yeah, it's, make your donation now, sow that seed, and then the Lord will return to you, 10 times more. And it comes from a verse in the Bible about a parable that Jesus makes, where he says, like, the master is away, so what does the servant do with his money, with his land and whatever. And the servant who actually duplicates, the servant who increases his master's yield or whatever will be rewarded, right? And so they take that and they say, see, you will be rewarded if you just increase your spiritual yield. And the best way to increase your spiritual yield is to give us $500. Right? So people fall for this shit. Anyway, getting back to Kingdom Now theology, right? Those are the people we're talking about. These are the fucking televangelist scam artist guys, right? So the big part of their theology is that the modern world is run by Satan, right? Satan is in control of this world. How many times have you actually heard that yourselves? I've heard that a million times, actually. Satan runs this world, and what it is that, like behind the scenes, right? The devil's in charge of the world, so that means that all of the governments and stuff like that are working with him behind the scenes. And so everything that comes out, that is out there right now, all the governments, all the music, all the corporations, everything that we have is the result of satanic influence, and it all must be fought against, right? And the way to fight against it is, of course, to put Christians in charge of everything. And so what they talk about dominion over the kingdoms of this world, right? But they don't mean just governments with kingdoms. The government is part of it, but they also mean, like, kingdoms is basically any aspect of life. So they'll say the kingdom of education, the kingdom of, science, the kingdom of media, entertainment, whatever, right? And this has kind of led to a specific form of this type of dominionism. Is called the Seven Mountains Dominionism, right? And the idea is that there are seven mountains, 7 pillars to modern life, right? The family, religion, education, media, entertainment, business, and government. And the goal of Seven Mountains Dominionism is to put Christians in charge of all of those 7 mountains, those 7 pillars, right? So that Christians have control over all of those aspects of life, which is pretty much every aspect of life, right? So it's not just putting Christians in putting Christians in charge of high positions in the government and regulatory agencies, as judges, right, and stuff like that. And so it's not just like, electing Christian politicians. It's putting them in charge of all of these different parts of the government, but not just the government as well. It's also getting them in charge of media companies and corporations, right? Things like that, putting them in high positions inside of universities, right? That's a favorite target of the Christian right, is to, they're always claiming that universities are a hotbed of Marxism and blah blah blah, right? And so they're trying to basically infiltrate their own people into universities in order to take them over from the inside so that they can enact their agenda, right? And this is where you get the difference between hard dominionism and soft dominionism. So the soft dominionism is basically just that, putting people in charge of stuff. That's the soft dominionism, right? The hard dominionism is taking over the government and enforcing, that's the R.J. Rushton-y kind of Christian Reconstructionism wing. Those are the hard dominionists, the guys that want to, like, take over the government and forcibly forcibly institute Christian biblical law and everything. Those are the people that want to stone you to death for cheating on your spouse and, if women are not virgins when they get married, right? Stuff like that. So that's the kind of difference. And most of the politicians and stuff that we have today in the United States are part of the soft dominionism part, where they just want to gradually kind of take over slowly, Oh, wait, let's undo that. They gradually want to take over slowly, They just sort of put people in high places and, change a law here, change a law there, and then before you know it, abortion is illegal, That's the kind of the main threat that we face nowadays. Right. Let's see. So we already talked about all that. I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about this spiritual warfare thing. So they believe that the world is run by Satan, right? Which means that the world is that Satan is real, demons are real, right? Devils and demons and stuff are real, and you have to strive with them in, everyday life, right? So they call that spiritual warfare. And of course, it's not like demons aren't invading people's body like in The Exorcist and shit like that. But what they say is that, well, this policy is demonic. You saw a big thing with this with, for example, gay marriage, right? Coming out of these sort of Kingdom Now people. Gay marriage was Satan trying to destroy the sanctity of marriage. How many times did you hear that? You're destroying the sanctity of marriage. It's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Blah, 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 blah. And this is the theology behind it. The theology behind it is they think that ultimately all of this stuff that is contrary to their religious beliefs is the result of Satan. That's where it all comes from. So, and it kind of makes sense from their point of view. If you were a conservative Christian person, if you believe that there was a Satan and you believe that demons and devils and shit are real, right? And you believe that they are currently unleashed on the earth, then it would make perfect sense to see like, okay, well, if you believe homosexuality is wrong, then a law that tries to, legalize homosexual marriage, right? Gay marriage, a law that tries to legalize gay marriage must obviously come from Satan, and that's kind of the rationale behind all of this stuff, right? So, in their mind, and it's important to understand this, right? In their mind, they're not acting bad. They're not being homophobic. They're not being racist. They're not, in their mind, right? In their mind, they're doing the right thing. In their mind, they're trying to protect the rest of us from going to hell, right? So they think it's good. And, you get lots of very bizarre justifications for this kind of thing. Even up to the point where it's okay to kill people in order to save them from going to hell. This is why you get people that, for example, will, like I saw a thing in England, for example, right, where a kid was beaten to death because they thought he was engaging in witchcraft, right? This is why, because, it's like, well, it's better if we need to exercise, they were trying to give him an exorcism, right? And it's like, it's better that he should die with a clean soul than live and, ultimately go to hell, right? Same kind of thing. And this is the kind of shit that it leads to, So this sort of, it's also used to justify any kind of bigotry, Just like you just said there, Tombstone, it's dumb and shields humans from accountability for their debauchery and crappy behavior. Exactly that, It allows them to engage in any kind of bigotry and any kind of hatred, things that we would call hate speech, because they think they're trying to save people's souls. So, good example of this, the Westboro Baptist Church. If you guys remember those people, they're still around. They're not anywhere near as influential or even prevalent as they were 10 years ago. But they're still around. They still go around and they still protest at gay weddings and the funerals of soldiers and stuff like that. And they go out and they hold these very homophobic signs and engage in, if it wasn't a religious thing, then people would call it hate speech. But it's not hate speech because it's their religion, right? These are God hates fags people, right? That's the Westboro Baptist Church, right? And in their mind, they think they're trying to save people. They think they're trying to prevent people from going to hell. So it allows them to engage in any kind of the most vile behavior like ever. Right? Exactly, because they really fucking believe it. So it's like, how do you fight that? How do you convince people like, hey, you're doing more damage here, when they think they have a fucking divine fucking mandate, it's really kind of messed up. So hang on, let's go ahead and read a little bit more here. I'm getting close to the end of my stuff. So anyway, one little last segment here, and then we'll read some comments. So I do want to go through, that's pretty much everything as far as my material, but I do want to kind of list some famous politicians who have connections to Christian Dominionism. First one is a guy named Rick Perry. I'm sure you've heard of Rick Perry. He was the governor of Texas for a little while. He also ran for president in 2012 and also in 2016 and got annihilated. Didn't even get close. He became Trump's energy secretary. Rick Perry is a big-time Dominionist. Another guy you might have heard of, Ted Cruz. He is also a big-time Dominionist as well. He kind of hides it, Ted Cruz. He never straight out says any of the more wacky shit. Some of the people on his team that he has are huge Dominionists, as well as his father, Rafael Cruz. Rafael Cruz is subscribes to the Seven Mountains Dominionist, school of thought. So yeah, Ted Cruz definitely. And then if you look at, the kind of things Ted Cruz says, he sort of uses a lot of Dominionist, like dog whistles, shit like that. So he's into that stuff. At least I don't know if he actually believes it, but Ted Cruz at least is actually using these people to like get elected every election. Another guy is Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Not as famous to the rest of us, but is also into this stuff. He has said that elected officials must look to Scripture when they make laws, because every problem we have in America has a solution in the Bible. Not so sure about what the Bible says about, say, global climate change or cybersecurity or that kind of thing, universal health care or any of those problems. I guess if they're not in the Bible, then they must not be problems, right? Maybe that explains why these people never want to do anything about those issues. Some other people that, Rick Santorum is also a Dominionist, big time, far right-wing Christian. He has said that Satan is attacking America and that America is engaged in a spiritual war. All sounds familiar, huh? Some other people who you'll say, like, yeah, no shit, of course they are. Michelle Bachmann, former congresswoman, is a Dominionist. She's a wacky, insane, right-wing Christian person. Her husband runs one of those pray away the gay institutions, where Christian parents send their kid to go, gay conversion therapy, send their kid to not be gay anymore, and they just end up like having sex with the with the counselor there or something like that, right? Christian, Christian anti-gay conversion therapy does not work, by the way. It's bullshit. Anyway, moving on. Sarah Palin, of course. That makes, did I mention Sarah Palin already? Sarah Palin, yeah, of course. I mean, no surprise there to anybody, right? Josh Hawley is a Dominionist, or at least he's kind of supported some of these people. If you're not familiar with Josh Hawley, he's the guy that the day, of the insurrection in Washington, January 6th, he was walking in to go vote on certifying the election, and he gave a big fist salute to all of the insurrectionists there, and then of course voted to not certify the election. That's Josh Hawley. He's a right-wing Christian conservative Dominionist as well. Okay, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, of course, is a Dominionist. She's very, 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 very much against abortion, so expect her to try to overturn any abortion laws that are speedily on their way to the Supreme Court. Just as kind of a side note, I talked about it, I've mentioned this before, but, as a little tangent here, growing up, I never thought that the right wing in this country would ever really try to outlaw abortion. I always thought that was just like a wedge issue that they use to, like, rile up their base and make money through donations and stuff. But looks like they might actually kind of go for it this time. Looks like they have a Supreme Court that might actually, like, really overturn Roe v. Wade. So just remember, folks, this is what happens when the wrong people get elected. Elections have consequences. And I don't know. I still kind of think they might chicken out and they might actually not go for it, because if that happens, I predict that there's going to be a major backlash. And the next election cycle, the Republicans will get destroyed. However, that still won't put abortion rights back to the way they were. It's going to take a constitutional amendment, which maybe that's a good thing. Maybe if they get destroyed, if they outlaw abortion, then the Republicans will get destroyed and we'll have congressional majorities, and then we can finally put a constitutional amendment to protect fucking reproductive rights, and then all of this shit will finally fucking go away. I don't know. Somehow I don't think that's going to happen. Anyway, let's see here. I need to put a new layer. Of course, Louis Gohmert, of course, is a Dominionist. He's an insane person. Marjorie Taylor Greene hasn't straight out said anything about Christian Dominionism, but she certainly speaks their language, seems to be. Former Senator Bob Barr. He was the guy that in 1996 introduced the Defense of Marriage Act, which actually outlawed gay marriage. So, just to kind of show you an illustration of how far we've come in the last 20 years. 1996, gay marriage was illegal everywhere in the country because Christian Dominionists like Bob Barr managed to get a law passed outlawing it. Took another, what was it, 12 years before that got overturned. So how many people in the meantime were waiting around, unable to get married and stuff, unable to have those, proper protections that they're entitled to, because some fucking Christian, conservative Christians got a bug up their ass and basically enforced their will on everybody. Elections have consequences. Of course, Bill Clinton signed that shit into law, so Democrats are not blame free in this. He could have vetoed it, but he didn't for whatever reason. I don't know. Moving on, Chuck Grassley is, I'm sure you've heard of Chuck Grassley, and another guy named Don Nichols. He was also the senator from Oklahoma who introduced the, along with Bob Barr, was the co-sponsor for the Defense of Marriage Act. These two guys are part of a thing called the Foundation, which is a Dominionist group in Washington. They run a halfway house where junior Republican congressional people are allowed to stay for free. And they're the people that run the hold the national prayer breakfast every year that the president always goes to. So just kind of showing you how much power these people have. You know, the national prayer breakfast happens every year, and the president goes and he gives a speech and blah 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 blah. God bless America, etc. Those are Christian dominionists right there. Those are people who want Christians to take over the United States and make it legal for them to stone you to death for daring to have sex before you get married, but women only. Remember that. Men are allowed to have sex all they want. Men are allowed to cheat on all their wives, shit like that. Have sex with their handmaidens, have sex with their sister-in-laws, all these things. Women, fuck no. Because in the Bible, women are property. Anyway. But the biggest dominionist that we could mention here, the most influential, and the guy who did probably the most longest damage to our country, is George W. Bush. George W. Bush was a Christian dominionist, for sure. He put possibly dozens, if not hundreds, of such people in charge of many things during his administration. You know, putting them into key positions in, like, the State Department, for example, or, you know, Health and Human Services, or the FDA, stuff like that. This kind of resulted in real-life consequences for many, many people. You know, things like the stem cell research ban that, you know, basically put us behind the curve as far as stem cells. And, you know, if they wouldn't have banned that, we would have had an extra 8 years in order to get some of that shit going, and we could have some cures for some stuff by now. Right? That kind of thing. Another guy was Marvin Oskey, who also was somebody that George W. Bush was very friendly with, somebody that worked in his campaign and etc. Right? He was Bush's top consultant on welfare. So, lots of the reasons why, you know, social programs were cut, welfare programs were cut, stuff like that under the Bush years because of Christian dominionists, you know. This guy, Oakley, his entire career was financed by a multimillionaire named Howard Ahamson. How do you pronounce that shit? This is this guy's last name. Let me type it in the chat here. Let's see. Ahmanson. Amanson? Is that how you pronounce that? Anyway. So this is the guy that, this multimillionaire dude is one of Bush's big financiers, who is also a rabid Christian dominionist. He basically got his friend Oakley here, Marvin Oakley, put onto the Bush team. His life's goal is to integrate biblical law into all of our lives, and was a big proponent of intelligent design. Right? So yeah, so we have had Christian dominionists in charge of our country before, and look where that led. You know, the Bush administration, I don't think I need to say to anybody, was a major disaster, which we're still dealing with the fallout of the Bush administration. You know, the war in Iraq, for example. That alone by itself, I mean, caused who knows how many deaths. And we're still dealing with it. That part of the country, you know, is still, you know, reeling. I mean, it was not that long ago, just a couple of years ago. I mean, we had ISIS and shit. running all throughout there. I mean, and all of that stuff, all that death and destruction, the possibly, up to 1 million people dead in the last 20 years, all of that could have been avoided if our president didn't invade the Middle East because fucking God told him to. And I'm not making that up. There's an actual, let me see if I can find that. There was a link that I had for years and years and years. Let me just take a quick Google here. Bush, God told me to invade. Bam, number 1, independent UK. Bush, God told me to invade Iraq. Right? This is here, I'll put this down here. So, yeah, long story short, I'm not going to read this whole thing. Long story short, George W. Bush prayed. He prayed one night, because Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, blah, blah, blah. And he sat down and had this come to Jesus moment and asked God, should I invade Iraq? And apparently God told George W. Bush to invade Iraq. And that's why 1 million people are dead. That's why, eventually it led to this huge shitstorm. And it's led to the migrant crisis in Europe. And it led to the rise of ISIS. And, all kinds of shit. All of that sparked because we elected the wrong person who's taken his marching orders from fucking, he's taking his advice, right, from like an invisible man who lives in the sky that no one can prove exists. This is what happens, man. So, very bad news, And I mean, okay, do I think that, the United States will ever turn into theocracy? Or I guess the word was theonomy, right? That was the word. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think we're ever going to wake up one day and the world, the country will be like The Handmaid's Tale. You know what I mean? And non-Christians are going to be like persecuted and there's going to be public executions and stonings and blah, blah, blah. I don't think it would ever get that far. I think, if anything, before that should happen, there would be, a civil war or something. However, do I think that conservative Christians would use their power in order to pass laws that are highly discriminatory against non-Christians? Yes. Because we've seen that happen. That's exactly what, the Defense of Marriage Act. There you go, right there. Right off the bat. Conservative Christians using the force of government to codify their religious beliefs as law. That's what that was, right? There's no good reason why two people of the same sex should not be allowed to get married at all whatsoever. There's no reason that makes sense unless you're an insane conservative Christian person and you're just trying to impose your will on people who don't believe in the same thing that you believe, right? So yeah, do I think, the danger lies there. The danger lies, will they outlaw abortion? Will they enable it? I mean, they already get they already have it so that our tax dollars are going to Christian institutions, right? Things like Christian private schools and stuff like that. They already have that. They already don't pay taxes, right? It's only a matter of time before they try to take that extra step. They try to do things like outlaw abortion, right? Take away trans rights, for example, stuff like that. Enable it so that I don't know, I read a story about how in Montana there's a government-funded private police force for a particular church. There's one church that has somehow managed to get the government to pay for their security. And they basically have their own private police, right? How long before shit like that happens across the rest of the country? It's This is what they're trying to go for. And so, yeah, I don't think they'll ever be stoning people for adultery. But it doesn't have to be, the most extreme example in order to make life worse in this country. It doesn't have to be like them stoning people to death. It can be them taking away the rights of non-Christians. Right? Which is something that they've said that's exactly what they want to do. So, yeah, disturbing shit. Things that we should all be aware of. And this is stuff that no one really talks about once elections come around, It's sort of like when you talk about politicians, their religion is off limits, at least in the mainstream media. They won't talk about people's religions. That's almost like, you're not supposed to talk, it's supposed to be private, blah, 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 right? Like, for example, when Mitt Romney ran for president, nobody talked about how wacky and ridiculous Mormonism is, right? And all the weird shit that they believe, and how up until 1978, black people weren't allowed to be Mormons. Nobody talked about any of that stuff, right? And it's like, because it's, it's not supposed to be, right, it's supposed to be, like, private. But these people and their religions definitely inform the decisions they make. And that can have bad consequences for the rest of us. So, anyway, that's my prepared material. Let's take a minute here and let's read through some of the comments here. Let's see. Okay, first off, let's kind of zoom out. Let me take a break for a minute. My hand's kind of hurting. It's looking pretty good, huh? See, when you zoom out like that, it tightens it up. So even like, say for example, you see all this stuff down here, how this is like sloppy. We'll clean that up later, but when you zoom out, that'll be the size that it's displayed in. Looks a little bit better. You don't really notice it so much, huh? So anyway, let's read some of the comments here. Adversary Fandom 2, God is comatose and have no idea we exist. So, I'm not really a religious person myself, really. I mean, I'm more of an agnostic, right? So, I don't really believe that there's no possibility that there's an afterlife. In fact, I kind of hope there is an afterlife. I think it would really suck if when we die, that's it. Game over, that's it. It's just black, and you just don't exist anymore. You don't experience anything. That would be kind of shitty. It seems to me that there should be more out there. I don't know. I don't know why. And I understand that this is just my personal desire. This is just me in my mind, like, and what I want. And I don't actually have any proof that there is an afterlife, or that anything else out there exists. And I would never claim to be able to even try to prove anything. Until somebody can invent a machine that opens a portal, and when you step through the portal, you end up in heaven or hell or purgatory or something like. Until that day happens, there really is no proof one way or the other. It's just my personal want, my personal desire is, I hope there's an afterlife. I hope there's some form of existence where you get to understand the meaning of the universe, and and plus it would be cool to fly around as a ghost and shit, maybe visit Mars or something. It's like, if you're a ghost and you can fly, why hang around like some spooky haunted house and shit for eternity? Why not like go to Mars, go to Venus, go to Pluto or something, go explore the rest of the universe? Like, why are you just chilling in like a burnt up, like, crusty ass house with a bunch of like rats and cobwebs and stuff everywhere? Like, haunted houses make no sense to me. Anyway, so let's see. Anyway, Lewis the Hedgehog, maybe someday we will make these miracles happen through science. Yeah, they will. I'm pretty sure somebody will invent some water walking shoes one of these days. That'd be kind of cool. What's that saying where they say sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic or something? You know, I have no doubt about that. You know, that kind of opens up the idea for things like, like alien intervention and stuff. Yeah, right. Like when people think like, you ever watch Ancient Aliens on the History Channel? And like, these guys who think that like early religious figures were really aliens in disguise, that kind of thing. Which is interesting to think about. I mean, it's bullshit, obviously, but it's interesting to think about in a sci-fi kind of way. you know, um, I don't know. That might be a good idea for a stream too, to talk about like UFO cults. You know what I mean? You guys ever heard of Raelians? Years ago, these were the people that back in 2003 they claimed to have cloned a human being, but they won't reveal who it is or whatever. Years and years ago, I used to work at a Starbucks, and a guy showed up and gave me this book, and it was about Raelians, and they're like a UFO cult, And I read it, and it was goofy and ridiculous bullshit, but I thought it was funny. And I'm kind of thinking about it like UFO cults are sort of really interesting to me because they remind me of cargo cults. Like, you guys know what cargo cults are? Like in the Pacific, and down in the Pacific, like island places, during World War II, soldiers would show up, and there would be like the natives that live on the island, and the soldiers would go and they'd start a base there, like, with airplane drops and stuff like that. And then after the war, they left, and like 20 years later, different, like, anthropologists and things would show up to these islands, and there would be these cargo cults that started. And what they were like, the natives there mimicking the behavior of the American soldiers that were there 20 years before, right? And so they saw, like, on some of these islands, like, the natives would do things like they would build an airstrip, and they'd make an airplane, but the plane would be made out of wood and, like, palm leaves and stuff like that, right? And there'd be a little airstrip, and then there'd be like a tower, a radar tower, and then one of the guys would sit in the radar tower, and he'd have like headphones on, but his headphones would be made out of coconuts, and he'd be sitting in the room like talking into a microphone, and the microphone was like made out of wood or stuff like that. And they were mimicking the behavior of the soldiers, because the soldiers like did all this stuff, and then like planes would land, and then they would have like things inside of the, you know what I mean, like goods, right? Food and clothes and things inside of the planes. And so they were basically like, they thought it was like magic, and so they were doing what they thought the soldiers were doing because they wanted the planes to come back, right? These sorts of like kind of fundamentally misunderstanding the technology that was presented to them. That's what these cargo cults were, and there's a lot more there's a lot more involved in those. Anyway, the UFO cults remind me a lot of cargo cults because they're like filled with ridiculous bullshit, and it seems to be like a fundamental misunderstanding of what they're saying. Like if you think UFOs actually are real and they really are a craft from other worlds or something, right? Then you see things like George Adamansky, for example, or Billy Meyer. I don't know if you know what Billy Meyer is. Billy Meyer is a guy that from Switzerland, and he has like one arm, and he takes these really fake looking pictures of UFOs and stuff, and like claims that he's been on the that he's like friends with the space people, and they've taken him to like other planets and shit like that. And he has all these really fake ass pictures, and he sort of has this cult of people around him who like pay him money and shit. He started a fucking UFO cult. That's like basically what they are. It really reminds me a lot of cargo cults. You know, that's what UFO cults are to me. And I don't know, it might be interesting to maybe make a stream about that one of these days. Hang on, I screwed that up. You know, I don't know how we got off on that tangent there. Let's get back to the comments. Let's see. Adversary Fandon, bring these guys a complete set of bones and make them revive it. Oh yeah, we were talking about miracles, right? Christian, you know, scam artists healing people. You notice how they never heal, they'll never heal somebody who has like his arm missing, you know. They always heal stuff that's easy to fake. You know what I mean? So it's like, it'll be somebody that's sitting in a wheelchair or something. And then they'll be like, okay, get up out of your wheelchair. Oh, you can walk again. You know, or something like that. Or another one that I saw was, once I saw on a documentary. God damn it. There's like a spot or so, oh, it's on my monitor. Okay. There was like a spot right here and I couldn't erase it, but it was on the monitor. One time I saw this documentary about, you know, I think it was James Randi, where he was debunking some of this stuff. And he was like, okay, well, when you get the guy that has one leg that's smaller than the other, and what they do is that they'll sort of pull the shoe down so that it looks like the leg is growing, that kind of thing. You know, so it's all like fake, you know, like they never do something like, oh, hey, here's a guy that can't, like, who's bedridden, who's like has cancer and he can't even move anymore. You know, heal this dude and then have him stand up and walk around. They never do that shit. They never like heal people who are missing limbs, right? Like nothing that could be demonstrably shown to actually like be a supernatural healing. It's always stuff like, oh, you have pain in your leg. Oh, the pain is gone. Oh, it's like God can only heal shit that like has no visual like, you know, indication of stuff that's actually like wrong with people. You know, you can't like remove somebody who has like third-degree burns all over their body. Can't like, you know, can't do something like that. Someone who's gotten like their nose chopped off or like who was blind, you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, let's see. Going down. Tombstone. I grew up hearing that Satan is the Lord of the world. It's dumb and shields humans from accountability for their debauchery and crappy behavior. Beliefs inform actions. This is what makes a bunch of this stuff dangerous. The fact that the people really believe it. For sure, for sure. It's, you know, that's the other thing that you get from you know, especially like evangelists and stuff. Like, every once in a while you'll catch one of them doing something really like immoral or illegal. You know, like Billy Graham or something cheating on his wife, shit like that. You know, or Kent Hovind cheating on his taxes and going to prison, right? And, you know, they'll always claim it was Satan. It's always Satan that Satan caused me to sin, but I'm okay now, you know, and you should give me money again. It's like, instead of like, you know, it'd be better if you just took responsibility. Like, I don't know, I mean, myself personally, I'd be more apt to believe someone if they just said, hey, I just got in over my fucking head. I didn't know what I was doing. Before I knew it, I was embezzling, you know, embezzling money and shit like that. And it was wrong, I admit it. I'd be more willing to trust someone that straight out just admits it. Like, okay, well, you know, rather than somebody who was like, Satan took control of my life. You know, and I was not responsible. I lost my spiritual war. Like, you know, instead of that, it's like exactly what you're saying there, Tombstone. It's just a way to fucking, like, skirt responsibility and scam people into giving you money. So, let's see. Lewis the Hedgehog. I heard a woman who kept hearing voices in her head from a Mormon family who killed all her children, believing it would prevent them from going to hell. But to be fair, I know what it's like trying to save people who hate you when you feel like you're trying to save the world, but that doesn't make you wrong about everything. There are other topics. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that happens more often than you would think. You know, happens so often that it's kind of become a stereotype. the idea of the crazy Christian person listening to, God told me to kill my whole family, shit like that. Um, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that people with mental illness, that type of mental illness tend to latch on to stuff like this, right? That kind of, I mean, whether it's schizophrenia or whether it's whatever. I'm not a professional. I'm not a doctor, so I can't really speak about the causes of mental illness or whatever. You know, but people, it does seem that there is an awful lot of people that use religion in order to fill out their sort of delusional fantasies. Um, I remember I had a friend years and years ago named Mike. Um, and, he was kind of a pretty good guy. He did a lot of drugs, right? But then again, we all did at this time. So did I, actually. I'm not going to deny it. Anyway, but he was a cool guy. And he was actually like the big brother of one of my close friends that we would go and party at his house a lot because they had a Neo Geo machine, so we would always go there and play video games. It was cool. Anyway, so I run into this guy about maybe 12 years later, you know, and I haven't seen him in like literally 12 years, like a decade, right? And I'm talking to him, hey Mike, what's going on? I just randomly run into him on the street and he starts talking about how the Catholic Church is putting voices in his head. And I was like, wait a minute, what? I was like, what are you talking about? And this was like the first time I'd ever encountered this kind of thing from somebody I knew, you know? Like, because, you often hear about this a lot from random people, or you might encounter like, homeless people or something who are like talking to demons in their head or something like that. But this was the first time it was somebody I actually knew. And I was like, wow, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And the thing is that I was able to have a perfectly rational conversation with him, but he just thought that Catholic priests were invading his thoughts and they were telling him to do shit. And so I didn't want to like belittle him. So I'm talking to him and I'm like, wait a minute, okay. Well, what are they telling you to do? You know? And he's like, I don't know. I try to drown him out, stuff like that. And I'm like, okay. And I quickly kind of excused myself, and then I called my friend, um, so his little brother, his name was Tom. I was actually, I was friends with both of them, but, you know, more so Tom. And told him, like, hey, dude, it's been 10 years. What's up? Hey, your fucking brother is like, you know, hearing voices in his head. You got to get him some help. Right? He's starting to getting a little worried there for him. And yeah, and he basically said to me, Tom says to me, hey, there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, I know he's got a problem, but we can't get him committed until he's a danger to himself or somebody else. And I was like, well, do you even know, and apparently, Mike was living in a halfway house. So he wasn't homeless, he wasn't in trouble with the law or anything, but kind of it's only a matter of time. If you don't get some help for people like that, they tend to end up being homeless, and I really haven't heard anything since then. This was I think, God, this was like 2013 the last time I saw this guy. So I was just sort of like, yeah, because we used to hang out a lot, stuff right around '01, you know, between like say like 1998 and '01 was when we used to hang out a lot, and then I kind of moved away, and then friends sort of drift apart eventually, and then I see him like 12 years later, and was like, holy fuck, he's like, this guy's like fucking talking to like imaginary people in his brain and shit. And it was like, you know, using religion, right? Religion becomes a vehicle for, well, not a vehicle. Religion sort of becomes a prop, I guess, that a prop that people use when they're in their delusions. You know what I mean? People tend to latch on to, you know, because especially if you're a believer, if you believe in this shit, right? Then, you know, it can do things to your brain. I don't know. So kind of, yeah, I mean, that's my limited experience with dealing with you know, schizophrenics. I don't even know if he was schizophrenic or what, but I don't know. I haven't heard from him or his brother in quite a while. I should look him up and see what's going on with those guys. Let's see. I'm gonna have to cut this short here a little bit. Sorry, guys. But thank you all for joining. Let's see. Let's scan through the comments one more time here. Lewis the Hedgehog. People often accuse Bachman's husband of being gay, by the way. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you've seen Michelle Bachman's husband. He's incredibly gay. He's in denial about himself. Seriously, just yeah, if you guys are interested, just look him up. He's a guy that runs like we were talking about. He runs a Christian anti-gay conversion therapy, and he is gay as hell. And I think the guy would probably be much happier if he would just admit this about himself. So anyway, I'm gonna have to end this up here. But thank you guys so much for joining me. Before we leave, let's take a look at where we're at here. This is our picture. It's looking pretty good. I think I might do some stuff to make these letters here, this text, fit in with this banner a little more. You know, because it kind of looks like it's just sort of cut and paste and stuck on there, doesn't it? But, you know, I think it's looking pretty good. You know, we might have to clean up some of this stuff on the floor and put some more texture on the wall back there. Maybe put something here underneath the picture of Mom, because that's just sort of like a blank space. Maybe we could actually, like, maybe I'll draw another guy and put him there, because that's kind of like a big space to have nothing there. Anyway, thank you all so much. Thank you all for joining. Let's go ahead and, you know, end this. Thank you, Adversary Fandon. You're great. Thank you, Lewis the Hedgehog. As always, great to see you there. Thank you, Tombstone Deman. Tombstone Dead Man. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining, man. Really appreciate that. And One Life of Gods. Thanks for joining, too. Cool. Well, yeah, thank you for watching. I mean, if you'll watch the stream later, awesome. Really appreciate that. You guys are the best. I'm going to go ahead and give my ending speech now. So if you guys like what I do and you want to support me, oh yeah, and then I also have to say thank you to my patron, my one Patreon. His name's Joseph. I don't want to give his last name. You're the man. Thank you so much, Joseph, for supporting me on Patreon. And if you want to support me too, you can check me out on Patreon. This is my Patreon. If you join at the $1 a month level, I will give you early access to videos as much as possible. I will also give you a shout out in my videos. If you give me $10 a month, I will make a video on the subject of your choice. No matter how ridiculous or silly or controversial that video may be, whatever it is you want me to talk about, I will talk about it to the best of my ability. I'll also draw something for you, black and white. And if you give me $20 a month, I will give you anything from my SD store that you want, and everything in the previous levels. So thank you so much there. Speaking of SD, this is my SD shop. If you want to support me and you don't want to do a recurring thing on Patreon, please consider buying something from my SD shop. I do these sort of hand-stained prints. They're actually kind of popular. Holy shit, 8 people. Wow. All right. Hopefully those 8 people will buy those. And then I'm starting to do little things like these little parasite sculptures and stuff like that. So this is my SD shop. I'll put this down in the chat here if you guys want to you know, support me there. And then also I'll put my Patreon down here too if you want to check me out. All right. Thank you so much. This here is my other YouTube channel. Come on, load. What are you waiting for? Hurry up. Refresh. Why is that not refreshing? There it goes. Okay. This is my other YouTube channel, so if you want to see me talk about, I talk about, you know, mainly toy reviews. I also do some gaming streams once in a while, game reviews, gaming hardware. The channel started just talking about video game hardware and stuff like that, game consoles, but kind of expanded into this other stuff that I like. So if you want to see me talk about non-political stuff and, you know, video games and toys and movies and things, please check me out on UCD videos. I'll put that down in the chat too. All right. I also have a, let's see, I have a DeviantArt website, so if you want to see more of my artwork, this is DeviantArt at /Hawanja, and you can see all of my artwork and stuff here. I also have a webcomic called Hawanja.com, fun for the whole stupid family. And it has ninjas and demons and stuff like that. There's about to be a big fight that's about to start here. Trying to update this once a week, but I don't always hit it. It's more like once every 2 weeks. But anyway, if you want to check me out there, that is at Hawanja.com. And I think that's pretty much it as far as all my stuff goes. Thank you guys so much for joining. Really appreciate it. So everybody, you're great. And we will be back next week at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Not sure what we're going to talk about next week. Maybe we'll talk about UFO cults or something. I don't know. I'll have to figure out a subject. Anyway, you guys are the best. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Adios.